Hey, what did you talk about this week?
Welcome back to the Corporate Kitchen. I'm your host, Tiger. This week, we've been talking about politics. Again, this week's episode wasn't going to be controversial. When we talk about politics in general, I know it drives a lot of emotion, a lot of passion, as we talked about on Tuesday. At the base of it, it's just competition. When there is competition, there's going to be politics. Unless you're pursuing a career in a municipality, you are pretty good staying at a 101 level of playing politics. If your career interests are towards the municipal area, this is not going to be for you. You definitely need a more advanced level of politics conversation and intervention because that's a deep game of politics. But for the most of us, we're nearly skimming the surface. And we have to understand that we have to do it just because we're competing. We're always in competition. These companies, whether public or private, are in the game to make money. For them to make money, you have to take away money from someone else. There's only so much cash that can be spent. Everyone's fighting for the power and to be the number one person. That being said, I do want to reiterate that you can do this. A lot of people, including myself, wonder how do you play the politics game? How do you get involved in it? When in reality, you do it every day. When you are competing against your peers for that promotion, when you are competing in traffic, right? That's a good one. When you're playing politics. You want to get to a destination faster than the next person. You're competing with them to reach and merge the lane before they get to the lane. And it comes full circle in a lot of stuff that we do in life where we don't realize that we're out here trying to influence to get ahead. It's a level of politics. With that, the first story I want to go over and the first takeaway, let's start with the first takeaway. The first takeaway is get educated. Education is something that we talked about in many previous episodes. The one that I do want to bring up as we talk about this example is the dating episode, where you want to be educated on who you're actually dating and their relationship to anyone else in the company. That is critical if you want to play politics as well, because you want to know who their circle is, not just their friendship circle, but also their kinship circle. Who are they related to and how much true, like, absolute power do they have? For me, I remember one time I worked at a company. This is actually the first company I worked at coming out of college. Started there and worked with this one person who he was a great person, but very difficult. By difficult, I mean questions everything. Every process, every decision, every start came with the challenge of having to answer questions that this person had. And this person will go as far as to pull the manual. And who reads the manuals, right? The 600 plus page manuals, this person will go and pull out one section out the manual and say, this is wrong because of this. And we would have to go get the person that wrote the manual. Luckily, that person still worked there and have that person explain this is their intent. This is their interpretation of what they meant when they wrote that section of the manual in order to get the person who asked the question to agree and understand that we weren't violating anything and we were in full compliance. It was a very rough relationship that I had with this person, working relationship, just due to the fact that everything came at a competition. Everything was contested. And I always felt like I was competing with this person to get to the path of least resistance so that we can complete a task. Always competing. It's like, hey, we have all these lanes. Ooh, look, we have 3 people in the car. Let's take the HOV lane. And this person will be like, no, let's just stay in the middle lane because this is going to be the least amount of traffic. But it's like HOV is literally right there and it's open. And it's not even a toll HOV, it's a regular HOV. And this person will be the one to tell you that's like, no, just stay in regular traffic because we don't want to miss the exit. It was that type of relationship. And this lasted years. And I developed a very strong knowledge base thanks to this person. So I am thankful for that type of resistance when I started my career. All those questions really helped me understand a lot of things and expose me to different topics that I wouldn't have been exposed to without the questions. However, the level of difficulty created by all the questions was very much non-value added to the situation. It was very excessive and it created a lot of unnecessary work to get things done in an efficient manner. So, as much as I'm thankful for the situation, I'm also like, man, life could have been a lot easier for not just the group, but for the company to get stuff done if this person wasn't so resistant. I learned later in my career that I'm actually more appreciative of people like that because they are not afraid to challenge the status quo. That's one of the powers of influencing, being able to challenge the yeses, not always agreeing and providing concurrence to the yeses that you hear and being the one to just challenge them and say, hey, no, this actually doesn't work. That is a very powerful confidence tool to have in your repertoire when you go about playing politics. Because a lot of politics is, hey, I'm competing with this person. I'm going to do the best to beat this person, but I'm not going to speak up when that person's wrong. That person can be completely wrong. And I decide, hey, I'm just not going to say anything. I didn't do that in this situation because I was playing hardcore politics too. Every time you had a question, I was like, no, you're wrong. And sometimes the person was right, sometimes the person was wrong. It was closer to 60% the person being right, 40% being wrong. Even with the 60% being right, though, it wasn't show stopping. It wasn't earth shattering. It wasn't like, hey, you found a fault. And because of this fault, we needed to stop everything that we were doing and start over. It was more like a, hey, that's a good to know. We'll correct it for next time sort of thing. And I had to learn pretty quickly the impact of the questions that were being asked, assess to understand, hey, you're asking this, but who cares? What does this really mean? And that's where my education piece came in, truly. In addition to the questions, it was also like, hey, I have to assess, like, who cares? Why should we care? Why should we spend as much time debating this as the person wants to? What is it going to do for us? Huge education level for me. And I got very educated in the situation. At the end of the day, that person ended up going to a different group and we all reminisced on the situation like, wow, thank thank you that he's finally gone. We were very happy that he left because it was a pain and we got stuff done a lot faster now that he was gone. Fast forward, I get introduced to someone of the same last name. And this is when I was smarter. I wasn't beginning my career. I was more seasoned in my career, got smarter and understood the simple fact of, hey, when you're getting educated about people politics and nepotism, it's as simple as researching a last name. You really have to take the time and listen to last names of people that you meet. And if you've heard that last name before, you may want to double check the checkerboard to see if those are connected, right? If we're playing Connect Four, does these dots make a straight line? Is this path direct or indirect? So I met this person later in my career with the last name of the person that I aforementioned in the beginning of the story that was the difficult person. It So last name I that was very unique that I haven't heard outside of these 2 people. Like, literally, there are many different names in the world, and it wasn't like it was a very exotic one and very short, but not a name that I've heard much, if at all, that I can remember. I can't remember at all in my life outside of these 2 people of hearing that last name. So, heard it when I met the first person. Now I get introduced to the second person, same last name. And I'm like, huh. First thing that came out of my mouth, like word vomit, was, "Are you related to such and such?" And I got the response of, "Yes, that's my father." Wow, right? Eyes open. Okay. The group that this person was in let me know that this person has just as much education as their father. This person's probably really smart just based off the group alone and knowing this person's father. Having that level of education let me, and it is a little bit of a bias, so you have to mind your bias, but I did have a little bit of a bias and made the assumption that, hey, this person is smart, they know what they're doing, and they can probably question everything that I do if they are like dad. Funny enough, the very next thing that came out this person's mouth was like, did you work with my dad on the line? Did he give you a hard time?" And I was like, "Oh, he knows his father. He's self-aware. This is awesome, right?" So not only am I educated on the connection, but now I understand the kingship does not mean that these are the exact same people that I'm dealing with. This person is a little bit more self-aware. They understand how their father put people through a lot of stuff, and they're not gonna do the same thing. That was amazing to see. You're not gonna necessarily get that so much with others. There are people where the apple does not fall far from the tree at all. I've met a couple people, and we're talking like juniors was their name, and just like their father. It they shared the last name, I mean, the same name because it was junior, but also you would think you could just drop the junior and call them the same person the way that they acted. Just literally carbon copy, same exact thought process, same exact demeanor, stature, and you couldn't really tell, hey, does this person look up to their dad and they just want to be like their dad, or is this just how they are? I tend to believe this is more how they are. The good news in those type of situations, or at least in that situation for me, when it came to influencing, they were influenced the same way. You can get what you needed from both of them for the same exact way. Made life a little bit easier, but also it's 2 against 1. So if I'm competing and I'm playing politics, I'm in the minority, they're in the majority. And I'm trying to convince 2 against 1 using the same tactic. The same tactic works on both of them, but I am repeating a tactic to try to beat the odds. Doesn't always work in your favor. Just got to be mindful of that. But overall, having the education to know where the nepotism lies in your organization is key. You got to get educated. Just like we talked about in dating, you don't want to talk to someone and figure out that, hey, you just decided to ask the vice president's daughter on a date, or you went out for drinks with the president's son. You might want to know that prior to the engagement rather than after. And I know some people are like, "Oh, I want to distance myself and not play the politics game. I want them to know me for who they are." Yeah, I understand that. And there are a lot of people that I've met that have made it to where they are with their own merit, and I don't want to discount the work that they've done. However, that connection piece, that kinship does matter. It can't be ignored, regardless of what your qualifications are. It can't be ignored. If you want to say that you didn't get here from nepotism, you got here on your own merit, that's fine, but we can't ignore the connection. It exists. And when it comes to influencing people, especially from a competing standpoint, that connection always exists as an option, which is why it can't ever be forgotten or severed. Because if we're not going to use it against you, there's always the option that you can use it against us. And just having that option available again is a reason that we need to be educated on it and we can prepare properly for that type of situation. So, first action, get educated. Second one, another kind of common sense thing. Second takeaway, key action, second key action, sorry, not takeaway, is mind your risk. Mind your risk. I have worked in a position that has given me the opportunity to travel to many different places in the United States. It's very cool to travel though, and it's also a little surreal. If you haven't, and a lot of people that I've met haven't been traveled away from, they haven't traveled away from their town. They haven't traveled away from their state. They haven't traveled away from their region. They're not educated on the different regions of the United States. But I've had the opportunity to visit a lot of places from California, Washington, Maine, Florida, and everything in between. I haven't done Hawaii or Alaska, so I can't speak to those two states. But as far as the continental United States, in between those four, I've touched majority of the states. And let me tell you, there is a huge difference between a Texas and a California, a New Jersey and a Florida, a Georgia and an Alabama, an Illinois and an Iowa, a Colorado and a Wyoming, a Utah and a Tennessee. It's just so different. And I think we make the mistake a lot of times assessing our career interests, especially our geographical interests, on a financial basis only. When we live in a time where people's political opinion, and when I say political this time, I mean, we're talking straight government, party, politics, everything that's going on in regards to administration. The passion is so high, the attention is so high, there's so much alignment to a certain political stance. And we can go over any topic. I mean, education, firearms, abortion, all the different subject matters in which there are very strong opinions either way. That's where most people exist. You have those very strong opinions on where you stand on many of those topics that in today's world, it's just gotten very, very, very divided. However, a lot of people aren't putting that into consideration when they are making their geographic career decisions and choices. When you decided to move from a top three school system, public school system in the United States to a bottom half, bottom three, and you have multiple children, but yet you got a 40% raise, was it truly worth it? Did you assess the proper risk? And most of the time, it's no. Most of the time, people don't. I will say I've had a lot of cool journeys where I went places, and I want to share a couple. But the key action here is just mind your risk and make sure you do a very collective assessment of all the political alignments an area has when you're making your career choice. For me, I remember when I got offered jobs in certain areas. So, one, I was interviewing with a company in Northern California, and at the time I was living on the East Coast. When I got to the final round of interviews, my thought process was, hey, if I get this number, we out. If I get this number, we're going to pack up, we're going to move out there, we're going to be living. And all I knew at the time was where I was, the state that I was in. That was my baseline for cost of living and how much stuff cost, how much rent will be, what type of place I can get. My whole baseline was where I currently was living. Then I got the opportunity to fly out there. final interviews, fly out there, go see the facility, go meet with the managers in person, and see the area. I did that. I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's not for reasons that you may think, but when I came back, I was feeling really discouraged about how expensive it is out there. I was like, oh my Jesus, like it is crazy expensive out there. Like there is no number that can convince me. But I did sit down and do a full assessment and realize some of the other benefits that are out there outside of just the financial compensation. And going through all the pros and cons makes sense. It made sense to go out there. I came to a decision that from doing a full coverage assessment, it will actually make sense. Look beyond the money, look beyond the monetary compensation, and look at all the political compensation as well. How either restrictive or allowable some of the benefits are of living in that state. What's the education system like? What's the healthcare like? What's a lot of different factors that exist purely beyond just the financial compensation portion. This happened again with me when I was interviewing to possibly move to Texas. And one of the things that stood out, like immediately, saying we all do the same thing. We get into interviews and we're like, what's the numbers look like? Bring out the spreadsheets. Let's see the numbers. That's going to highly dictate whether or not I say yes. You look at Texas and it's like no state income taxes. And you're like, wow, we can make money out there. Not just money, but money. If I'm not getting taxed on my money, I can make money. But that's not the only factor that we have to consider. We had to consider the school systems. We had to consider the healthcare situation and a lot of other different things to do a full coverage assessment. Know our risks, assess them against where we currently live to make a truly best total value decision. It's going to happen to you. As you continue to grow, you are going to have opportunities being your best self to grow your career in other places. And the monetary compensation may seem lovely, but you got to do a full coverage assessment. You have to look at everything and look at all the other possibilities beyond just the money. Because I'll tell you right now, 500,000 in Southern Cal versus 500,000 in Huntsville, Alabama are two different $500,000. I know I said the same number. That is two different $500,000. One is probably 2 Chick-fil-A meals, and the other is franchising 3 Chick-fil-A's. It's just 2 different types of money out there, and some places the money goes longer than others. But with the place that you get a Chick-fil-A sandwich, just a Chick-fil-A sandwich, you may get the best education in the world, and the place where you can franchise more, you may not. It's just 2 different areas because we live in a country that is huge. It is huge. We all couldn't be the same if we wanted to. It's, I mean, the size of Texas alone and California, our 2 biggest states, those states alone have probably at least 100 different like regional sectional areas in them alone that you can go in and be like, this is completely different. Like, this is California, whereas that's Southern California. But that's not the same as San Diego, California, which is not the same as Northern California, which is not the same as North California. You know, there's Sacramento North and then there's Oakland North. You can like really slice and dice a lot of these places and see totally different things. So make sure when you are looking to compete your interest in career, you mind your risk. And I had to do that. I had to do that full assessment and mind what was the best total value for myself and for my family. Last takeaway that I want to hit, I'll tell you the story of this one. I don't know why I keep saying takeaway. It's action. Thursdays we talk about action. See, that's what happens when it's been a while. I'm messing up on what we're talking about, but this one's gonna hurt a little bit. And this one I have to be really direct with. It's not controversial, it's very straightforward, and you're gonna understand it. The last action is swallow your pride. Swallow your pride. There are many things that are done out of your control. And we're not talking about when the administration or Congress makes decisions, laws, executive orders that you have no say in. No, no, no. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the company that you're working at. You are not the president or the CEO. We can even call you a director. You're a director at the time. But guess what? You report to a vice president who may or may not report up to more people. But the fact that you're reporting to someone higher in power means that there are decisions made that are just out of your control. It can be great decisions or it can be the dumbest thing that you ever heard. I want to give you a story about one of the dumbest things I ever heard. And it was just like, what in the world? So I was working somewhere and it was a manufacturing environment. So we were building things. Someone was installing a fastener and the fastener wasn't installed correctly. It got found later. The assembly was completed. It went further down the line. It got found later at a later inspection. That became this huge issue that turned into, hey, let's add an inspection before the installation of the fastener and after the installation of the fastener. And not only for this fastener, we're going to do it for every single fastener on this assembly. Now, the assembly, I'm not going to disclose, but we're talking solid 5,000 fasteners on this assembly. At least, at least, I'm probably not even hitting 50%, but let's go at 5,000 fasteners that have to go on this product, this assembly. And they wanted an inspection before and after each set. And we're not doing all 5,000 at once, right? So we have it broken up in chunks. It wasn't 5,000, or it's not 5,000 times 2 inspections, but it was a significant chunk. And they were like, yeah, we have to have this added to all the work instructions, like ASAP. And we're sitting there and we're like, what? How does that make sense? Why wouldn't you just address the single individual occurrence, considering that this was a single incident? A single incident now became a huge to-do project that affects everything. It's like the one person in class where they were grading by a bell curve, and it's like, if everyone fails, guess what? we're gonna be pretty good. We're all gonna work out. But then you get that one person to turn in their test and they got like a 98, and you're like, oh, there goes the curve. And that was pretty much how it is. Like that curve in school affected everyone when that one person did well. Here, it was one little incident affected everything, everything. And what's the term that we use for this? Knee-jerk reaction. The knee-jerk reaction, as soon as something happens that is not positive, there's this knee-jerk reaction in corporate by leaders to say, we need to fix it, and this is how we're going to fix it. If there was any level of a tactical pause that was taken during the time, we would have determined that, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe it doesn't make the most amount of sense to do this. Let's do that because this will prevent the problem from happening again. But there's never time for that. It is, you're going to do this, and we're just going to do it. And when it's done, we're going to say that we did something to address the issue that came up, and it's going to solve our problems moving forward. You're going to scratch your head when those happen. You're going to be like, man, that's not, that's not right at all. But swallow your pride. Swallow your pride and get it done, because this is a game of politics that you will lose. When we talk about being in corporate America, it's winners and losers. And as we talk about politics of corporate America, again, we're talking about competing interests for power and leadership. You hear of an issue, you have an interest in solving it, a solution. It competes with that. It competes with that of the people in positions of power. Well, guess what? They're already in power. You're not fighting for power. They are in power already. You are powerless, and you are not competing against them for the power. You are competing against them to try to get the solution. Not the same thing as the politics. Politics means there's normally a level playing field, right? The person that convinced this leader that they needed to go do something probably was under the same boat, right? Of, hey, they're probably a higher level than that vice president, and told them just to go do this. It becomes politics when it's a VP versus a VP. And now one of the VP says, hey, I'm going to make my team go do this in order to beat that VP. At that point, it's politics. And that is not necessarily a swallow your pride moment. And I've been in those situations too, right? I told you about the fastener installation where that's just a swallow your pride. That's not politics. That is the person of power said, go do this, and now we have to go do this. It feels like it's political when you get in there and somebody like, oh, this is just like government when they say like, here's these new law, you have to follow it. And not really politics. The politics already happened. This is the aftermath. That's the aftermath of that. Politics happened. They introduced a new law. Guess what? You just have to now conform and be in compliance with that law. You're doing the same thing in that situation where I have to be in compliance of the decision already made. It's politics when you're in the decision-making process. And that process includes competing against other people for power. I've been in a situation too, and last story alert, where a vice president had an idea. They wanted to implement a big change, and they wanted to do it first. It was a sprint to improve a certain area of the business so that they can look good to the senior vice president who identified that this area of the business needed improvement. But my vice president wasn't the only one that wanted to do that. There were 4 other vice presidents that all had the same idea. And guess what? They're all started competing against each other. It got political really quick because we were all competing for the same resources. So my VP was like, execute project Y to get this done. The other VPs are like, execute project A, F, G, L, Z. All these different projects, all having the same goal, and even worse, all sharing the same resources. So when it came time to ask a shared resource for assistance, now that person is feeling pressure because they're getting asked from 5 different project groups. And guess what? Now I have to play politics because now I'm competing against those other interest groups for dominance. Work mine first. I believe my solution's best. Don't do theirs. And now I have to play the politics game. Whereas if my VP was the only VP and the only person doing it, and I can just give a flow down that says, hey, leadership says do this. It's not politics. It's swallow your pride and do it. But when you are in a situation where you're playing politics for real, it's not a swallow your pride thing. It is politics. It is influencing. Gloves are on, game on. But not every situation is like that. And you have to be aware of that. That fastener situation is critical to truly understand, because there are just going to be decisions out of your hands, and that's not politics. And I remember I was like, shh. And it's happened more than once. That fastener situation is not the only one, but it's happened plenty of times where I just got the flow down and I'm like, that is stupid. Why are we doing that? And what did I say at the time? I'm like, oh, it's politics. Oh, gotta play politics. Oh. But if it was truly politics, you would be able to compete. And I learned that pretty quickly, where it's like, maybe, maybe it's me. And it turned out, yeah, no, it was me. It was just me interpreting it wrong. Because guess what? Most of the time, they don't even care. It's not, if it's politics, they care, because they want to one up. They want the power. When it's not politics and it's just flow down, once you get it done, people forget all about it. You ended up, most of the time, they end up undoing that decision like later on. Like it's just like a administrative task. Go get it done. You will waste more time putting emotion into it than you would just completing the task. Whereas in politics, no, like you want that emotion because you want to win, and we're fighting to win. And that's what it comes down to. I mean, the three actions we talked about: the get educated, make sure you know who people are, mind your risks, and make sure you're doing a collective assessment. And then three, just swallow the pride. Not all situations are politics, even if you view it as politics. It's some situations you just got to eat it and truly get it done and move on. That moving on part is hard. I know we touched on it on a couple of earlier episodes, but it's hard to like swallow the pride and say, okay, I'm just gonna do this without the fight. It reminds me of another time when,
Hey, you said last story. Can you wrap this up?
Oof. Okay. I enjoyed working on this menu item with you this week, but let's come to an end while it's still hot. Remember, the ending to one story is the beginning of another. There will be more in store next week at the Corporate Kitchen. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Tiger. Until next time.